how to improve your net worth starts with an understanding of what is involved in net worth, right? Assets, at its core, net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. In the prior segment, we were talking about ways in which to improve sort of the liability side, right? The liability side is the subtraction side. And so consequently, if you can eliminate the subtraction part of the net worth calculation, then obviously you can make some great strides to increase your net worth along the way. And so we talked about maybe refinancing, consolidating debt as some ways to get better off or improve the liability side of the net worth equation. Now we turn our attention to the asset side, because certainly increasing the asset side on your net worth is a great way to improve your net worth. And so one of the ways in which to do that would be to maximizing out your retirement contributions. One of the things about retirement contributions is typically they come with some tax savings, which allows you to get a little bit of an extra benefit to doing those contributions. And then if you have an employer plan, then you could certainly also be getting an employer match as well. So those are some great reasons beyond just improving your asset picture, improving your net worth. But if you are making those retirement contributions, you may find that you're saving on your taxes now, so that obviously helps with money now. And in particular, if you have an employer who still does some kind of a match, then certainly being able to do that match on the employer side is an extra benefit as well. Next up, to try and improve the asset side of this net worth picture is a suggestion that we've certainly made many times before on the program. That is to pay yourself first. If you pay yourself first, then that means that you're not paying yourself last. And oftentimes when people save, they say, oh, well, I'll save with whatever money that I have left over at the end of the month after I pay all my bills. Okay, that's the part that I'm going to take and I'm going to save. And the reality is that it just does not work that way, because what happens is, like most people, at the end of the month, then you don't have any money left over because you've spent it all on bills, or you spent it all on extra stuff. And the reality is that if you pay yourself first, though, that means you're taking that before you wind up sort of spending it during the course of the month, and ultimately saving that. So that's a good way. Paying yourself first is a great concept to increase the asset side as well. Cutting expenses, of course, is another good one. How do you cut expenses? Well, the easiest way to do that is to know what you're spending money on, and that means that you're tracking expenses. Now, oftentimes people get scared about the B word, the budget word, but certainly budgeting is a great way to be able to keep track of those expenses. If that seems too intimidating, let me maybe break it down to a simpler exercise that would allow you to kind of keep track of the expenses, and then that usually shows you opportunities to cut those expenses. Is just simply keep track of your expenses for a week. Don't try it necessarily for a month, although if you can, fantastic. But just for a week, and ultimately keep track of those expenses, of every dollar that you spend during the course of the week, and ultimately that will allow you to at least have some level of insight into how you are spending the money. So certainly that's a good way to improve on the asset side of things. And then lastly, like we were talking about in the prior segment, Dow Jones Industrial celebrating its 125th birthday, and during the 125 years, an annualized return of 7.69%. That's pretty good through all periods of inflation and recession and depression and world wars and everything, pandemics and everything in between. And I guess that's the other way to make sure that your asset side is growing or doing as well as it can, is to make sure that the money that you have saved, keep it in places where it's going to grow. One of the things that a lot of folks, I think, are struggling out there right now with today is that savings rates are so incredibly low that there's no way to make any level of a return on those savings today. And so if you're looking to increase or improve your assets, then you've got to have your savings invested in places where, in fact, it'll grow. Otherwise, it will wind up just kind of languishing and not really growing at the rate that you would like it to. Because understand that if you're trying to improve your overall net worth, right, then you've got to ultimately grow that asset side. And the only way you get growth is by making sure that you're saving it in places where you're going to get growth and not just a negligible return. And then lastly, thinking about the asset side and how to improve your net worth is buy a car and plan to drive it for as long as possible. I think that's one of the hidden ways of hidden wealth erosions that happen in America today, is this constant trading in of cars every 3 or 4 years. The reality is you buy a car, you hold on to it for 10, 12 years. Look, most cars these days will certainly last that. They're built that way. The reality is that's a great way to make sure that your asset picture stays strong, because when you buy a car over time, that is something whose value is going to go down. But if you constantly are buying or leasing or borrowing money to buy cars, then ultimately that does serve to undermine your overall asset picture. So some tips there to increase your net worth and improve it. Obviously, net worth starts with understanding what the formula is to determine one's net worth, and that is simply assets minus liability. So you've got two pieces of that to focus on. On the liability side, it's about consolidating debt, it's about reducing interest rates, it's about accelerating the time frame in which that debt is paid off, and that's a great way then to improve your net worth. On the other side of the equation, improving your net worth is also about improving the asset mix that you have, or the amount of assets that you have. And we've given you some examples in this segment of how to do that. To recap those, maximizing out your retirement contributions gives you the double benefit of getting some tax savings now, and also to the extent you're working for an employer who's got a match, then you can also pick up that match as well. Number two, paying yourself first. Far too many people pay themselves last. At the end of the month, after all the expenses, whatever leftover money, that's the amount that I'm going to save. Get out of that mindset. Pay yourself first. Take that right off the top, and ultimately, it is not money that you would see. And then number three, cutting the expenses by keeping track of your expenses is a great way to help minimize and reduce down the expenses, and because by tracking them, you're able to identify where that money is spent. And it'd be great to do it for a long period of time, but if you can just do it for a week, I think a week will be insightful for many folks to be able to get a handle on their expenses. And then next, make sure that the assets that you do have, that you are saving for the future, that they are invested where they need to be growing, and not just sitting in cash, or not sitting in investments that don't generate much of a return. You want those assets invested in such a way that they're going to grow. And then lastly, on the car side of things, buy that car, stick with it, live with it, and ultimately that will get you a better overall asset picture. So those are just some of the tips in which to improve, how to improve your net worth. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to continue the conversation on some of the ways in which you can retire rich without making yourself miserable along the way. Coming up next here on the program, Dollars and Cents.